Good afternoon, and thank you for coming. I'm here today simply to make some comments on the 11th step of the program of AA. Sought through prayer and meditation to improve our conscious contact with God as we understand Him, praying only for a knowledge of His will for us and the power to carry that out. So I'm not here to give a lesson in Catholic theology. It has nothing to do with that. I'm just here to give a few definitions involving our 11th step, because in the minds of many people who enter the sober life and have been estranged from God for years, there are many, many questions about prayer, about fear of God, even about what is prayer, how do you pray, and so on, and so on, and so forth. So what I would like to do is just give some definitions, and the very first is a definition of prayer itself. What is it? It is some kind of communion or communication with God. Now, why should we pray? Let's go way back to the beginnings of AA. Bill and Dr. Bob were not two men who sat down to try to come up with a beautifully explained manual on monastic spirituality. Please remember who they were and where they came from. They were drunks on a point of death who simply wanted to survive. Through pure trial and error, which is the most scientific way of learning anything, they went into the laboratory of human experience and came up with these 12 principles to live by. That is a skeleton of life and how to live it. It is in pure skeletal form, they laid down the principles essential to a happy, effective, and productive life. Strangely enough, step 11, prayer, they considered essential. Please believe this, please. If you could achieve the sober life through 8 of those principles, that's all there'd be. These are essentials. If you could get sober and stay sober through 2 steps, that's all there'd be. But there are 12, and one of them is prayer. Like it or not. It's there. What is prayer? It is some sort of contact with the God of one's own understanding. Why should we pray? I used to go into, and I will momentarily, the fact that prayer is the most God-like thing you can do. Because praying is doing what God has done from all eternity. Did you ever wonder how this perfect intelligence, what did He do before creation when He was the only thing in existence? With the divine intellect, the only thing He could contemplate was Himself, perfect being, and the only thing He could love was Himself. To know and love perfect being. I remember from the days in grade school, what is prayer? It is a lifting up of the mind and the heart to God. And so when we pray, we are doing something God-like that no other creature can do except the angels. Man is the only one capable of doing what God does, knowing and loving His Creator. Now, why should alcoholics and drug addicts pray? Ladies and gentlemen, simply because it is fitting. If any of you need an explanation of why you should deepen your knowledge and love of the God to whom you're attributing your sanity, your life, your sobriety. There's nobody on earth can explain it. You either see that or you don't. It is only fitting to adopt a deepening relationship with the person who's given you life through your sobriety. What more is there to say? It's only fitting that we should do that. A power greater than ourselves who could restore us to the sanity of rational living, not putting into our being, into our bodies, a substance that can destroy it. And so, it just seems fitting and normal to want to pursue a relationship with such a person who has given us that great gift. Now, what kinds of prayer are there? Well, there are many kinds. What is the purpose of prayer? There are many kinds. Let's look into the purpose of prayer. Many people consider prayer to be only petition. And a lot of evangelists, you hear, the power of prayer is that it's so strong it gets you anything you ask for. Let's watch the power of prayer. What are the purposes? There are 4 of them. To adore, to thank, to express sorrow for having broken the rules, and finally, to ask. Petition is last on the list. What do you mean by adoration? What do you mean by the worship of God? You know how the ancient Greeks came to a conclusion that existence is better than nothing? Anything that exists, even an inanimate stone, has one thing in common with God. It is. A flower or a blade of grass is a little higher in the hierarchy of beings because it has 2 things in common with God. It is, and it's alive. Animal life, as we know it, dogs, cats, and so on, they have what is called a sentient life. They feel, not only physically, but even emotionally. Scold your dog, watch the tail go between its legs. Go down to get the evening paper at the road and come back as if you've been away for a year. That old tail goes like that. That's a little higher. The human being can think. This is what makes us godlike. We can think and we can love. And so, since man can acknowledge God as his creator and himself as a creature of God, we're expected to do so. And that's what worship is. You are God, I am creature. You made me out of nothing, and I'm acknowledging that. That's adoration. And all prayer, whether it is personal or whether it is community prayer, should begin with that. Oh God, my creator and redeemer, and so on. Gratitude. Every person alive has reasons to be grateful to the God who gave him being in the first place, and especially for the addict, a second shot at life again. Sorrow for having broken the rules. He only laid down 10 rules for us to live by. And finally, petition for our needs. By the way, they tell the story of Moses coming down out of the hills with the 2 tablets. He says, I got some good news and I got some bad news. He said, number 1, I got him down to 10. Number 2, adultery is still on the list. So when we break any of those rules, we express our sorrow for it. All right, there are different kinds of prayer, and I'll explain why in a minute. There is personal prayer and communal or community prayer. Personal prayer may be the prayer that is purely personal of meditation. Somebody said, what's the difference between prayer and meditation? Not a whole lot, except meditation is a specific kind. Meditation, to think. This is where we develop a life of prayer that's purely personal. I think my own thoughts about God, and I love Him, according to those thoughts. Or since I don't know a whole lot, I read the writings of other people. I consult a clergyman. How many of us have been away from our churches because of addiction? And so that's one way of getting well all over, is to get well spiritually by, what do? You ask a man who knows one. Go to your clergyman and find out. Ask the questions that have been plaguing you. Try to find out something about this relationship you should be having with the God who gave you the gift of sobriety. The other is memorized or formulated prayer. How often, inside of your own soul, personally, with nobody around, have you recited the Lord's Prayer, the Serenity Prayer, or any other prayer? You can say any prayer you learned at your mother's knee. Acts of faith, hope, charity, sorrow, contrition, sorrow for sins. And any prayer that is said internally alone is quite personal, whether somebody else wrote it or not. Now we come to community prayer. This is the worship of everybody together. Now, the third commandment says, keep holy the Sabbath. God looks at each of us and says, I created you. I want you. I don't want anything that is mine to be lost. I want your thoughts. I want your heart. I want your prayers, your own personal prayers. Now that's individual. I know with my mind, my education, my background, and you know with yours. And I love with my heart, and you love with yours. That's all individual. He says, once a week, do it my way. That's your way. Once a week, do it my way. Get together as my sons and daughters and worship me together. Now, I would like to share something with all of you. The man who saved my life spent a year of his with Bill and Dr. Bob. He was so intrigued by this whole notion of people with the same problem sharing it and talking back and forth. They also share strength and love and stay sober together. And he spent a year of his life with those two men. And Bill Wilson said these words to him: AA is not anyone's religion. We are a therapy for a disease. Nor do we wish you to substitute AA for your religion. He said, whatever you were before your sobriety, you should be a better one afterwards. Your family life, your work life, your social life, but above all else, your life with God should improve with sobriety. And he said, we are not your religion. If you wish to go to a Sunday morning meeting, go before or after church. He said what AA does is set you free from the compulsion to use chemicals that separate you from God. We will set you free and open the door to God. Now you take it from there. You take it from there. So we have nothing to do with it. You take it from there. Now, what do you mean by community prayer, and what is its worth? It will do for me what I so often fail to do myself. First of all, you worship together, and you offer gratitude together. You express sorrow for sin together, and you ask for needs together. What are some of the needs? Now, you have to be careful of judging a religion by some of its spokesmen. Too often I've heard people wanting to cop out from their religion and say, well, the nuns I had in school were very cruel, and they whacked your fingers and all that sort of thing. The nuns and the priests I had in school made me want to be a priest. They taught me about a loving God. But so often we do selective remembering, and we use it as a cop-out to get away from our obligations to God. But sometime those who preach awfully long. It was a snowy day in the country, and this old preacher got up. He had only one parishioner show up. He was the only guy that had a horse strong enough to brave the cold and drag the sleigh to church. And he spoke for an hour and 25 minutes. And afterwards he asked the old farmer, he said, well, what'd you think of the sermon? Well, he said, I'm just minded of the story of the old farmer that brought the load of hay out for the cows and only one showed up. He said, he didn't give the whole load to the one cow. But they tell the story of an old Irish priest. God, he was that way. He had diarrhea of the mouth and sometimes constipation of thought. But anyway, the old boy got up one Sunday and on and on and on. And Mrs. O'Rourke had a little wee baby about 5 months old, and that kid started screaming. I mean, really screaming. And she was so embarrassed, she got up and genuflected and started to walk out of church. And old Monsignor O'Brien says, Mrs. O'Rourke, you don't have to go at all. The little fella isn't bothering me one bit. And she turned around and said, maybe so, Father, but you sure are bothering him. Anyway, baptisms, weddings, and funerals are all taken care of by the community of our brothers and sisters. Baptisms, it was one of these river baptisms, 3 submersions or immersions. And the minister dunked the fellow down once. He said, do you believe? The fellow was sputtering. He said, I believe. Boom, down he went again. Pulled him up sputtering. He said, do you believe? He said, certainly I believe. And a third time, and he came up just choking. He said, do you believe? The fellow said, yes, I believe. He said, what do you believe? He said, I believe you're trying to drown me. I don't know whether that happened or not, but it's a great story. Weddings. When people come to me and say they want to get married, I always say, see a priest. I mean, in 50 years, I've had about 10 weddings. And I've never married a bride to an altar boy, but I came close twice, and I don't ever want to go through that again. Funerals. A priest showed up at a country parish one time. He came at night. He had driven in from the big city. And the very next morning, he had a funeral. And the man was a 52-year-old that had died, a couple of days before. And he didn't know him. He didn't know anybody there. So at the funeral mass, at the homily right after the gospel, he just gave a general sermon on Christian death and resurrection. And then, as you know, is done quite often now, he wanted some people to come up and recall something good from the man's life. He said it is customary now to recall the good about the deceased. Now, can anybody here remember any good that they know about this man? And they all sat there. Church was packed. He said, look, surely some of you know, this is a small town, some of you must know the man in the past 52 years, some of the good that this man had done. Well, he was a complete reprobate. Nobody was going to get up there. And he was really irritated. He said, doggone it, we're going to stay here till sunset, till somebody can come up here and say something good about this man. And with that, an old drunk came staggering up from the last pew. He hopped into the pulpit and grabbed the microphone and he said, his brother was worse. It was the only thing good he could remember about this guy. In most public worship, they pray for the good of mankind and they pray for the souls of the departed. You know what consolation that should mean to you? That after you're dead, the church, whether you're aware of it or not, will be praying for you, if no one else does. And then there is this thing called the divine office. Basically, it's a monastic prayer of the Psalter, the book of Psalms, and the writings of the very early theologians and fathers of the church. There's an adaptation of it called the breviary, a shortened form that every priest under obligation, that's why it's called the divine office. It's the official prayer of the church. When I was first ordained, it would take between 55 minutes and an hour to recite. Today it takes about 25 minutes. It's in English today. I have a copy at home and a copy in the office by the chapel there. I read the office every morning when I go over for Mass. I read it before Mass. And that's for you and the whole human race. Somewhere in the world, around the clock, thousands of priests are praying the divine office. It's not a personal prayer. I am an official prayer for mankind. So if you're too busy to pray, there are the likes of us worldwide who do it for you and who pray on your behalf and for your good. That's a consoling thought. It's a wonderful thought to think of. What is the best kind of prayer?